All right, peaceniks, peaceaholics, peacekeepers. All right. So it's been a crazy week. We did a bunch of cool stuff. Me and my wife drove up to Rhode Island. Actually, we stayed in D.C. for a night. She'd never seen the Capitol, so we saw D.C. Had an awesome dinner with my cousin. Then we went to Rhode Island, hung out with her friends. And we went to the Smile, which is Radiohead's new side project. Went and saw that concert. Then the next night we went and saw her friend from high school's band. They were really amazing at a little cool dive bar in Brooklyn. We stayed the night in Brooklyn. Then we got back last night. And I'm just now getting to the podcast, getting the editing done. Today's guest is Kimberly Clark. She's a Navy veteran who is a survivor of military sexual trauma. After being medically discharged and diagnosed with PTSD, she struggled with severe drug addiction and alcoholism for 10 years. Now, after finding recovery, she went on to become a peer support specialist. She published her book, Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God, and she is a Louisiana State Leader of a national nonprofit organization raising awareness of veteran suicide. We had a really great conversation. I was so happy to get to talk to her. So we're going to go ahead and dive on in.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Drugs are menacing our society.
Your thoughts on the drug problem?
I had a great time doing drugs.
So tonight, from our family to yours, from our home to yours, thank you for joining us.
This is the Peace on Drugs.
All right, Kimberly, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes. Now, are you in New Orleans?
No, I'm in about 50 miles out of Shreveport, in Castor, Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've only been to New Orleans in Louisiana. It's one of my favorite places.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, as far as Louisiana, I've only been to New Orleans, but it's one of my favorite places.
You know what? Like, as many places as I've been, I've literally never been to New Orleans.
What? Oh man,
Never been to New Orleans.
I'm a musician, so it's a great place for me.
Yeah.
So, you reached out to me. You have a whole story that I'd like you to kind of tell and go over. You wrote your book, Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God. So we'll start there, and then I have some other stuff I want to talk about with addiction and how you've handled it. And because people that listen to our podcast, there's people that some suffer from drug use, some enjoy drug use, but the people that are suffering, they can be helped by some of the people who have had these problems and have gotten through them.
Okay, absolutely. Well, I wrote, actually first I got the book has been on my heart since I was a teenager, like literally 13 years old. I've had the title of my book since then. And so it took me all of 2021 to write Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God. And it's a memoir about, having some childhood trauma, about, being like physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, emotionally abused, and then going to the Navy and surviving an MST, which is a military sexual trauma, right? And then looking for ways to cope with that. I struggled with addiction and alcoholism for the better part of 10 years, and within those 10 years, I was in and out of rehab, in and out of psychiatric units, in and out of jail at one point. And so that 10 years, man, it definitely took a toll on who I was, but I also found out who I was in the midst of all that. So the book definitely, it tells that journey, but it also tells of, how I healed, how I learned to love myself, right? And my passion behind helping other people do the same.
That's really great. And one thing you said is, you got to learn to love yourself. And that's something I think a lot of people forget about. They feel like they have to deal with their trauma. They have to possibly forgive, at least in some fashion, the person who hurt them just to make them move forward. I've had to do that in my past. But forgiving yourself or loving yourself, showing mercy to yourself, that's a huge thing that a lot of people don't do. And I think there's some psychology behind it that they said when you're a child, you can't control your environment. If you have an abusive parent, you're too small and helpless to do anything about it. And humans, we don't like to not have that control. So how we give ourselves control in the situation is we blame ourselves. And if you blame
Right.
yourself, then you say, I can control this, I can do better. And if you take on that mentality, you'll feel like you're in control even though you're not. And then when you get an adult, you feel like you are a horrible person and you're not. And you take that, and that's
Yeah.
where drug abuse happens and everything like that happens.
Man, you're right on point on that. Right on point. That's exactly, how I felt. Like I blame myself, and I felt like man, what did I do? Or matter of fact, I was so into people pleasing. I wanted to be liked so bad, right? And I was thinking like, man, it's my fault. It's something that I did to make them do this to me. But even then, I was like, man, I got to get them back on my side. They're mad at me. You know what I mean? And those feelings were so confusing for a 9-year old. And just, man, and children having to go through that, the turmoil they already go through, plus on top of things like this. So you're definitely on point with that. I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, and it's really sad when we talk about children. Children are going through trauma. It's happening right now. It's always happened. And then we live in a world now where if you turn to drugs to cope, you're going to be now hurt by the police, and it's going to be another form of trauma is going to happen to you. And I
Right.
don't know why we have a world that we don't say, hey, this person's on drugs. Something's going on with them. Let's help them out. Let's figure out what their trauma was. But we don't. We say, let's traumatize them further. Let's lock them up. Let's give them a criminal record to where they'll never get out of this. They're going to be traumatized the rest of their lives.
Right.
And the suicide rates are high. You talk about that. You talk about raising awareness for veteran suicide.
Yeah.
Let's raise a little awareness on that, because it's a topic that everybody can relate to, and that at least sympathize with. That nobody thinks our veterans who are out fighting for our country should
Right.
be committing suicide.
Absolutely. And I work for Mission 22. I'm the Louisiana State Leader for Mission 22. Mission 22, we raise awareness to the 22 veterans that succumb to suicide each day. Actually, the VA has misreported that it's actually doubled in the last year or so. So, yeah, there are 44 veterans that commit suicide each day. I remember back in 2018, I went to this rehab in Arkansas, and I found out about this statistic. I didn't know that so many of my fellow vets, were hurting like that. And I immediately knew I had to do something about it. And so I looked up organizations that help, that try to prevent that or at least raise awareness for it. And I found Mission 22. And so Mission 22, we have different programs that are 100% free to the veterans. We have a 12-month long program called Recovery and Resilience, um, where you have a coach, you have groups. It's like you can be literally anywhere in the world and do this program. It's done mainly virtually, and they'll sing you everything you need for like the whole year. Like they do stuff to where they sing you like this watch that keeps track of your heart rate, your blood pressure, things like that, and it sends it directly to them. I mean, they're really really thorough with this program, and it's 100% free to our veterans. Right? They have a 3-month program, 6-month program. They even have, just if you want to speak to a peer support specialist. I'm a peer support specialist, by the way. If you want to do that, like I said, it's 100% free. Um, we also have a memorial, right? Memorial where anybody who's lost a veteran to suicide, they can have them, they can have their name, put in this wall. It's like a memorial in Oregon. We have that, and we have families all over the country that come to see that and that reach out to us to put their to to so their family can be memorized.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so now, if somebody committed suicide, are they eligible to be on the wall? It's not just people that died in combat, or is it people that died in combat?
Oh no, it's just for the suicide.
Oh, it's just the
So,
suicide. Okay.
yeah, just for suicide.
Memorize them. That's That's a wonderful thing, and it's a tragic thing that we can't prevent the suicides from happening to begin with. But that's what you're working towards, Mission 22. Now, is this publicly funded, or is this all just through donations?
Mainly all through donations. There's a corporate side of it that I don't really know yet. But yeah, it's a national nonprofit. We have state leaders and ambassadors in each state. Um, but yeah, there's a corporate side of it that I'm not. I know we do mainly donations because all of us, all the state leaders and ambassadors, we do events 3, 4 times a month. We sell t-shirts, hats, golf towels, flags, things like that, all with the Mission 22 logo to raise money for these programs.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. So where can people buy that merch, and where can they go to donate?
Oh, mission22.com. You can get merch.
Mission22.com.
Yep, you can donate directly to mission22.com. Absolutely.
Okay, that's awesome. So let's go get back into the talking of addiction, how you got over it, and you said you used EMDR therapy. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So what is EMDR therapy?
All right, so don't quote me on this because I forgot the last part of it, right? I didn't forget it, but I'm horrible at memorizing. So eye movement, desensitization, and I got it, reprocessing therapy. This is the first time I remember that, right? So yeah, it's a therapy. It's meant to rewire your brain to where when you think about the trauma, it won't be so intense. It can be manageable, right? And so EMDR was a game changer for me. When I tell you, through those 10 years, I was literally in and out of rehab, in and out of psychiatric units, trying everything from medicine to CBT to healthy relationship classes, anger management classes, to all different types of therapies, and none of them stuck for me, right? And it's because none of them really, dealt with my trauma head on. And so EMDR therapy is trauma therapy. It dealt with my traumas, each one of them, one at a time, head on. And I was able to face them, right? To face them and overcome that fear and have shame-free honesty in a safe space to where I could get all of that stuff out, accept that it happened, right? And then find a reason to move forward, right? And so when you're doing all that work, you kind of realize that a lot of it, it really wasn't our fault. And then we're also able to take responsibility for the parts that we did play in some of the situations as well. And both of those together is healing. It's really freeing when we can, take responsibility for our actions and also forgive ourselves and forgive others, the people that hurt us. And so dealing with those traumas, it made the difference in dealing with addiction. Because that's addiction was just a symptom of a problem, right? The real problem is trauma. Trauma is the real gateway drug.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I talk about a lot on my podcast. But Johan Hari's book, he talks about if the building's on fire, the smoke is the addiction. And if you try to blow out the smoke, you're just going to fan the flames of the fire. The trauma is what you got to put that fire out. And then you're going to get rid of the addiction. So EMDR therapy, though, so it's eye movement. And then what was the other two?
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing therapy.
So eye movement, I'm confused. So what does the therapy actually entail?
Oh, that's the fun part. Well, there is either a light, there's a green light, or either they use like these vibrations in your hands that go from left to right to left to right. And the light also goes from left to right to left to right. And so your counselor, who's ever doing the EMDR with you, they ask you a series of questions about that specific trauma while you're either holding the vibration or looking at the light from left to right. And it's there's a science behind, moving your eyes or that left to right vibration, while you're talking about a traumatic event that rewires your brain. And so that's where that comes from.
That's really interesting. I wonder if that's probably something to do with left brain, right brain, and when you're going back and forth, it's sending signals back and forth through each side of your brain, and that's doing something. It's and like you said something about making the trauma less severe in your head, like making it less intense. And I read another way to do this is why talk therapy is so important is when you're with somebody you're comfortable with, and somebody that you trust and somebody that you don't see as a threat, and you talk about things, you bring up things from your past that are horrible, you're rewiring that memory in a place where you brought it up with somebody you liked, and it kind of takes some of the intensity away from that memory, because now when you bring it up, you have the initial memory, but you also have the memory of talking about it with somebody you were comfortable with. So that's kind of same kind of thing. We try to take our trauma and put it in a place that's a little less painful.
Right. Absolutely.
So you did say you also spent time in jail. So the war on drugs has directly affected your life as well. And now you seem to be doing well now, and you're past all that. But for a time, it definitely affected you. So let's ask how the war on drugs affected you in your life.
Yeah, man. I addiction, and I know you've probably heard this a lot. It turns you into a completely different person, right? It makes you want the drug above all else. My drug of choice was alcohol, cocaine, crack cocaine, pills, pretty much anything I could get my hands on. Everything but IV drugs, of course. And so yeah, it turned me into this completely different person. Literally every charge I've ever got is a direct result of addiction, and alcoholism. And so you're talking to somebody who had a clean, clear record, right, and wanted to stay that way. At one point, I, even wanted to be a police officer when I first got out of the military, and so that completely changed everything for me. Being around people that you're not supposed to be around, or being at the wrong place, um, where there's nothing but drugs and just criminal activity going on, but you don't care because you don't care about who you are. You just care about the drugs. And that's what was true for me. I only cared about the drugs. See, I'm country and I'm not hood at all, right? And so I would go to different cities looking for drugs, would hang out in areas I knew nothing about, and would get caught up with people who were pretty much doing the same thing, who would do anything for drugs. I never got into stealing or anything like that, but I was around people constantly, consistently, who did. And so some of it also was domestic. Some of my other charges were domestic. Me and my ex-husband, we would fight a whole lot, a lot. Um, and so I married a narcissistic man, extremely manipulative. He was emotionally abusive, physically abusive, and so he would trigger me, right? Trigger me, and I would react. And while I would react, he would call the police. And so yeah, I dealt with that for about 7 years. We were married for 7 years. I was in addiction for 6 of those 7 years. I was clean when I met him. Less than a year later, I was back using. And so yeah, man, yeah. The in and out of jail was, I mean, I did, I did most of it. So I can't sit here and lie to you and be like, hey, none of it was my fault. That's a lie, because I was in addiction.
Yeah, but
And
that's the problem, though, right? You definitely committed the crimes they're saying, but my problem is why are those crimes? Why is an addiction
right,
a crime? And like you say, if you're stealing for your addiction, the stealing is a crime, and that's something punishable. However, I would still go back, if these drugs were legal and affordable, nobody would be stealing for them. So again, the war on drugs is causing the thefts, and that's the problem. You legalize the drug trade, you allow people access to and use the money you're spending on law enforcement, on therapy, and helping people.
right,
Then you're going to have a lot less crime, but then a lot of cops are going to lose their jobs, and they don't want that. They like the war on drugs.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I
And
completely agree.
yeah, they need to criminalize. If you basically, if you make marginalized people, poor people, and people that have suffered from trauma, if you make their recovery, which is how they deal with it through drug use, you outlaw that, you're going to have people that you can lock up forever. You're always going to have customers for your jails. And
Right.
I want a society that doesn't run on, basically it's on locking people up. That's what the whole system's about.
Right.
Can you lock people up and lock them out? Once they get out, once you've done your time, you get out. Why do you have a criminal record? Why am I still being punished for something? My punishment's over, but it's not over. When I go to get that job, that's why I like the ban the box thing. You should not asking me what I've done in my past if I've done my time, but they do. And now you can't get a job. So what do? You either work a very low income job because the job you want is not going to hire you, but you can get a job, something with a criminal record, but you're not going to be the manager, the boss. So then you're going to probably turn back to a life of crime because you're not fulfilled and you still have that trauma. So now you're back to using, but you can't afford the drugs you want because you're working a minimum wage job. So here comes the crime. Now you're back in the system, which is what they wanted. You're still a customer.
That cycle, that vicious freaking cycle. You are so right about that, man.
Yeah, it's completely backwards in our society. So messed up for it. But a lot of people, and this is going to bring me back to your book, Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God. A lot of people that do find recovery, they do use things like you said, like the EMDR therapy, talk therapy. There's a lot of good therapies out there, but the big thing that most people seem to come to is some sort of spiritual practice, and that's what I had to do. My spiritual practice was more meditation and accepting, being in the moment. But a lot of people turn to Christianity. I'm guessing let's describe how spirituality helped you out.
Okay, yeah, spirituality was foundational for me. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I couldn't do this on my own. That literally all of my ideas, everything I tried, did not work. And so the only thing I didn't try was a power greater than me. And in my life, God worked. I do practice Christianity. Like I said, that was foundational in my life, man. When I say that, doing those steps, right? Those steps, and not even necessarily 12 steps, because there's so many different paths to recovery. The SMART recovery, Celebrate recovery, the 12 steps. You have Women for Sobriety. I mean, there's just a lot of different paths, but making those steps to love yourself, to get to know who you are, right? And get to know who you were created to be, and finding your purpose, right? I had to find my purpose and my passion. That's what really got me unstuck, because now I can focus on, I can focus on doing something that I was created to do. Because when we're walking in our passion, when we're walking in something that we were created to be, that's a healing feeling. Like, it's a feeling like no other. And so finding my passion, finding my purpose, and knowing that God was the only thing that could do that for me was the change. Was definitely the change for me.
And do you feel a deep connection with with Jesus and the Christian belief system?
I do. Absolutely. I do.
That's cool. My guest that I have, that's actually coming out next week, but if anybody listening to this, it'll be last week's guest, because you'll be coming out the week after. But he's a pastor, Jason Robinson. He was a guy I grew up with. He was one of those all drug, that pedal to the floor. He was moving drugs from Florida coming up here. He was facing all this time in prison. He ate like 200 pills. And when the cops pulled him over, thinking they'd pump his stomach, and he woke up paralyzed. But then he got the ability to walk back. He tells the story, so anybody listening to this may have already heard it, but it was just a really fascinating story. But he turned his life over to Jesus, and now he's a preacher. His book is from the pulpit, from prison to the pulpit. But yeah, it's like I say, spirituality, and he really talks about it in a really passionate way. He's always been one of those passionate guys that just anything he was doing, he was 100% in. And at first, it was drugs in that game. Now it's God in that game. And he's like, I'm the same person. I'm just using my power for good now, and he's helping heal people. And so same thing you're kind of doing.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask another thing. So spirituality is very important, and it's talked about a lot. But another thing I find extremely important for me, and I think it's important for everybody, but a lot of people don't consider, is having a connection to the natural world, to nature. I go out
Yeah.
and walk in the woods daily, and I find that. Do you do something like that with nature? Are you connected with nature?
Yeah, I do. I meditate actually, and I only meditate like outside because that's where I feel. That's where I feel my best at, and honestly, that's where I feel connected at. And so I do that. I do that on a daily basis. I meditate outside. I'm just when you get to a point where you can look back at your life and all the things that could have killed you, that was meant to kill you, that was meant to destroy you, or meant to destroy your character. Like there's no way, that a Navy veteran should have, 7 different things on your record, right? It's so many different, so many different things that was meant to destroy you. And when you look back on those things and how everything has changed now, how wow, like even with those things, on my record, God still allowed me to get a job with the state of Louisiana. And I work as a peer support specialist now for the state of Louisiana. I don't even know how that even happened, honestly. Like, there's no way it should, but it did. And yeah, thinking about those things that, that could have happened but didn't happen because we were protected, we were safe, that's something worth celebrating. That's
Yeah.
something worth celebrating, right?
Well,
And
and like you
sitting and
said, that
pondering
when you say you have, all these charges and you were still able to get a job and be at the position you're at, I think if for your specific job and what you're doing, you need to have that experience. I don't want to, if I'm going to go in for help with somebody, I don't want somebody who's never been through it themselves. They're not going to understand. And so I think
on.
that's almost that should be add to your resume, not take away from it. Like, here's what I've
Yeah,
been through, but I'm not, I'm recovered. Okay, well then you're hired. You're qualified for this job.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the qualifications of peer support specialist is lived experiences. And so, if there is anybody out there who has a criminal record like mine, or even anywhere close to mine, or who has some lived experience, not only with addiction but with mental health, period, right? Becoming a peer support specialist, you can become a peer support specialist in any state, right? The training is like between 2 to 4 weeks. Um, they basically teach you how to empower other people, right? We can't cure them, right? We can't diagnose them, but we can empower them to help themselves. We can empower them to take back control of their life. And so I do recommend that if you're having trouble because of, the addiction and the things of your past, peer support specialists, and that there are jobs that you can work directly in peer support to where you can use all that bad for good.
That's awesome. That's great. Definitely would recommend people doing that. I might have to look into that myself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you another thing about back to time in jail. I remember watching, if you ever seen the show Intervention. I can't stand the show, but I watch it sometimes for more research for my show, because this is the show that shows people what addiction looks like, or what they are supposed to think of addiction to look like.
Right.
And the reality is you're seeing people at their worst in a system under prohibition, and they're on camera, which is a weird thing that we do. So this one episode, and I've talked about it on my podcast enough to where some people might be tired of me telling the story, but the woman is a meth addict. She's getting dragged out of her house. She's screaming. The cops put her in the back of the cop car. They take her away. And her doctor is there with the mom. And the doctor looks at the camera and says, she's going to jail. She's very, very sick right now. And jail's going to be a really good thing for her. And it just shocked me to my core. Like, why not a hospital? She's very sick. Jail's going to be good. You're a doctor. Have you ever heard of a hospital? You're a doctor. I'm pretty sure you've heard of a hospital. That's where sick people go, not jail. But that's the mentality in this country with addiction, is jail will teach you the lesson you need to learn and get you off the streets where the drugs are. And they fail to mention that you can get drugs in jail, you can get drugs in prison. A lot of people will quit, though, because it is a sort of rock bottom where they say, you know what, I'm going to change. Some people do. And then those stories are the ones they pop up as jail working. Most people, it doesn't cure. Most people, it doesn't help. But I wanted to ask you, in your what you went through, did you ever think this is going to be good for me? This is my point where I'm going to change going to jail, or was it always just worse?
It was always worse. Not one time did I get out of jail and do the right thing. I mean, not one time. Like every.
Oh, we lost you. I lost your mic.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I can
I'm
hear
sorry.
you now. Okay, you're back.
Okay.
Sorry.
Awesome. No problem at all. Yeah, it made me so angry because it's so crazy. I remember a cop saying that. I remember him saying, "Man, she's real sick. She gonna be good in jail. And the jail gonna bring it out of her, or something like that." You know what I mean? You know how hard, I mean, how humiliating and hard it is to have to detox in jail. Like I've had seizures before, almost to the brink of death, trying to detox off of alcohol. In what way would that help me in jail? In what way?
It
You know
won't.
what I mean? It
And you
would
can't cure someone who's dead, and alcohol withdrawal can be deadly. You could have had a
absolutely
seizure and died, and then what would have happened? They would have said, "Well, she was a criminal. That's what she gets." It's like, what about the hospital where her life would have been saved? But that's the thing, and I wonder. I'd be curious the statistics. How many people do die every year from alcohol withdrawal in jail? It's probably not a huge number, but I guarantee it happens. If they're not
yeah,
if they're not willing to give those people the right treatment, then they're going to get, if they seizure up, they can die. I mean, it's a very serious thing if you're on alcohol withdrawal,
absolutely, absolutely, it is, brother. Yes, indeed.
and they're not going to let you have alcohol in jail. And I just came through Hurricane Ian, and we have some friends down in Fort Myers that are staying at the shelter, and the shelters are really dangerous places. They're becoming dangerous, but one of the problems is they don't allow drug use, and some people are addicts. If you're an addict, you have to have your drug, or you're not going to stay in the shelter. So what they're allowing is people are drinking alcohol. You can drink
Right.
outside of the shelter, but not in the shelter. So now the dangerous areas are outside the shelter where there's no security and everybody's doing their drugs, and people are overdosing on fentanyl out there. All these things are happening because there's no safe place. Like we don't have any, what are they called? The safe injection sites, whatever you want to call them, the harm reduction places. They aren't happening in Florida, not in Fort Myers, not where people are. I mean, but these people have been displaced. They have no homes. They're addicts. And you're saying, well, you can stay here as long as you don't do your drug. It's like, well, that's going to be a problem for some people. And maybe send them to the hospital if you're not willing to let them in there, but you got to help them out somehow. And they're not doing it. And that's kind of the problem with jails. The problem with our whole system is this, well, if you're an addict, well, that's your fault. Why is that our problem? But that's the reality, is people have addictions. People are going through these things, and we need to be able to help them instead of harm them. And we need to keep them alive. You can't cure someone who's dead.
Right. And that's what like the harm reduction is supposed to be around. But I kind of feel a little, I'm not gonna say indifferent. I'm kind of leaning each way with harm reduction, because I agree with it and I kind of don't agree with it at the same time. It's like I understand like people are going to do what they're going to do anyway, right? So why not give them something clean to use, like clean needles and stuff like that? But then I don't agree with it because they know that if they don't have the certain items to get high, that they can go get it for free. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about the harm reduction sites. I just did like a what is it? A workshop. I went through a workshop about harm reduction, and the whole class, which was about 100 people, was split right in the middle. Like 50 agree, 50 didn't agree.
And you're
So
kind
I'm
of
kind of on
in the
about
middle.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm totally for it, because my thing is people are doing it anyway. You're not going to stop people from shooting up unless you were able to get all the needles off the street and they just weren't there. But you're not doing that. The needles are there, but they're sharing them. And I've been to a house where everybody. I never really got into shooting up heroin. I tried it once, but there was a part in my life when I was smoking it, and I would go to this house and everybody was smoking heroin. They all just got into heroin. Fast forward a month later, I go to that same house to smoke some heroin, and they're all injecting. And they're sharing needles, and it was just and the thing is, it was in North Carolina, you can buy needles, but even when you could buy them, some of them were it would be late at night and they couldn't get them, and they'd run out, and they'd be like, well, but they would They knew to
Yeah.
do some sterilization. But the point is that these once you're in that kind of addiction, you're gonna if you find a needle. There was a story in Maria Salavis's book, Undoing Drugs, about there was a place they used to shoot up in at a club in LA, and there was just a brick they'd pull out, and there was a community syringe behind the brick, and they would all just use that because they didn't know this was they all right as AIDS was coming. So
Yeah.
so many people were dying from AIDS. So the idea is if people are addicted, getting them clean needles helps. However, I'm not for that. What I'm for is giving them heroin. And they do this in Switzerland. You go to a place, you get your actual drug there, your drug's pure, and you get therapy with it. And then what they do, and what they have a 95% success rate in Switzerland because they don't want methadone. That's why they relapse constantly from methadone because they really want heroin. Give them the drug they actually want, heroin, and give them therapy. And then once their life gets back in order, they're going to realize, well, I don't want this addiction anymore because now I have family, friend, my life's back. I'm happy now. A small percentage of people will stay on heroin the rest of their lives, but live productive lives because they're getting it from a source that's pure, it's affordable, and they're in a structured. They're not having to search for it from different places and different houses and going through withdrawals some days when they can't find it, having to steal because they're paying too much money. And they might be on heroin the rest of their life. Some people will drink alcohol recreationally their whole lives. But what's wrong with that? That's what I have a problem figuring out is, well, what's wrong with that if it makes them happy? I had David Pozis on my podcast. He was a heroin addict, and he constantly would just say, I am extremely depressed. Heroin makes me happy. But he would quit because he's like, I can't live that life. I can't be trying to find heroin and paying all this money. So he wouldn't do it, but he would be really depressed. And he'd say, I'm happy when I was on heroin. I was happy. Why can't I do that? You can drink out. He would tell me, he's like, you can go to the alcohol. He didn't like alcohol. So you can go to the store and buy enough alcohol to kill yourself. But I can't do heroin. I'm a criminal if I do heroin. And it's a good argument, I think.
Yeah. Well, what about heroin destroying our bodies? Like, what about the drugs destroying our bodies?
Well,
I understand,
heroin on the streets is much more dangerous because there's brick dust in it. There's all kinds of chemicals. Fentanyl can kill you. Alcohol destroys your body way worse than heroin. If you have pure heroin and you're a heroin addict, way less damage on your body than alcohol. Alcohol causes all different kinds of cancers, high blood pressure, stroke. Also, it causes violence. You can be violent to your partner. Most domestic violence happens under the influence of alcohol. Most child abuse happens under the influence of alcohol. So alcohol is a much worse drug than heroin. And now you can make the argument that, heroin does cause problems with, neural deterioration in your head, as does alcohol. But the idea is we have to say we need to be honest about the drugs that people have that have access to. Say, well, you can get heroin, but you have to go to a doctor. You're going to do therapy, at least a small amount of therapy to make sure you're okay, to try to figure out why you're wanting to use heroin. Also, and then what we're going to do is be honest. Say, here's what can happen if you use heroin the rest of your life. Here, just like say with cigarettes, we don't outlaw cigarettes, but we do tell everybody exactly what they can do to you. That you can have heart disease, emphysema, lung cancer. This is all things that will happen or can happen. We're honest about it, and a lot of people quit smoking because of the honesty, the truth campaigns. And we need to do the same with alcohol. Alcohol somehow slipped right through it, where they just they should not be allowed to advertise for it. There should not be commercials for alcohol. There should not be posters for alcohol. I used to be really annoyed when I get in North Carolina, like, why can't I buy liquor in the grocery store like I can in Florida? Like, this is so stupid. And now I'm actually on the other side where I think all alcohol should be sold in a separate store. None of it should be impulse buys at the grocery store because it is a dangerous drug. I should have the right to do it, but I should be told honestly the harmful effects of it. And I should have to make a separate trip to a store and possibly even have somebody working there that has counseling experience that can ask you when you come in, hey, is everything all right? Anything you want to talk about? And you can just say, no, I'm good. And you go. But some people might get that question and go, you know what? I'm not all right. And then boom, give them some therapy, give them some help. Because I see people in the liquor store paying with coins, pulling out coins to pay for their little mini bottles. I'm like, that's a true addict. That's somebody who needs help. But they're not getting asked if they're okay. They're just person's annoyed that they have to count the change and then send them on their way. So I think we need to restructure our relationship with alcohol, but we also need to restructure our relationship with other drugs, as in legalize safe access and getting people help. That's my opinion on the whole thing. So harm reduction sites to me is just one way around keeping it illegal, but making it a little less harmful. The illegal drugs are the problem, and all the people profiting from them are dangerous criminals. If you buy cocaine, you have to face the facts, and you can blame our government's prohibition for it. But the reality is you are buying your drugs from murderous cartel members that are chopping people up, and that's who
Yep.
you're funding. That's where your money's
Absolutely.
going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I came to that realization. I'm not a big fan of cocaine anyway, but there was a time when I did a lot of it. But now I'm at the place where I wouldn't buy cocaine, even if I was like, I haven't done that in a while. I'd like to. No, I'm not supporting those cartels. But again, you can blame them if you don't want to say, well, that's because of, or you don't have to put the blame on yourself. You can put the blame on prohibition, but the facts are facts. You're buying from a murderous cartel.
Right. That's true. That's true, man. And it's crazy. Like the thing about alcohol, you never see a commercial or anything stating the dangers of alcohol. You never ever see the dangers of alcohol. There definitely needs to be more media, more commercials, more anything that's telling you the dangers of alcohol and what it's doing to our bodies, what it's doing to our children, because our children are taking it thinking it's fun and entertaining because they see it on TV as fun and entertaining, right? And that's not at all what it is, And so definitely we need to get more support out here, just like we do with cigarettes, we need the same with alcohol.
100%.
I definitely agree.
And it's a weird world we live in where it's like if you do heroin, you're shunned. But if you don't do alcohol, in some circles, you're shunned. Like you better drink, but you better not do this. But you need to drink. It's like when I go through phases, I like drinking and I enjoy it. But I go through phases where I cut it out for a while. Like I'm gonna take some months off of drinking and just and I work in bars and I play music. So people come up like, let me buy you a drink. I'm like, oh no, thank you. I appreciate it. And I quit drinking at work anyway. So I'm always turning those down because it was hard. If you drink at your gigs, which if you're a full-time musician, you're an alcoholic. There's no way to drink at work and not become an alcoholic. So I just cut it out. But anyway, people, they get confused. Like, well, let me buy a shot. I'm like, no, thank you. And then you'll see the wife kind of grab the husband and be like, whisper something in his ear, which is probably like, stop. He probably has a problem. It's like, I don't have a problem. I'm just not drinking at work. It's not, why is it a problem if I don't drink? It's so weird. But that's our society we live in. But yeah, you're right. We need the truth campaign that we had for tobacco, for alcohol. And think about it. If you watch a drug commercial, any drug big pharma wants to sell us, they have the fun commercial, they're dancing, and then what does it end with? All the side effects. So why aren't we doing that with alcohol? Here's the people on the beach drinking their Coronas, having fun, and then may cause these kind of cancers, this kind of mental deterioration. Let's list all that stuff, but they don't have to because they've paid off the right people, I guess.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. But if more people stand up and say that it's wrong, I mean, we, the people, actually have more power, but we have to unite and do it together.
That's right. That's right. And that's why when I talk about drug legalization, because I've had people talk about, well, I should be able to go to buy heroin at Walgreens. I shouldn't need a prescription. If you can buy alcohol, why can't I buy heroin? It's a good argument, but my problem is we messed up with alcohol. We fucked up. So why should we make the same mistake with other drugs? If we can't roll back alcohol, we should try to roll back alcohol to make it, just like I said, less advertisement, take the sexiness out of it, put it in a separate store. You can still get it. Everything's fine, but you're not going to get it the way you're getting it. And then heroin, these other drugs, you got to go to a doctor, talk to your doctor. And that's how it used to be before Prohibition. Most of those drugs were not available over the shelves. You had to go to your doctor, but doctors were like, oh, you're a heroin addict. Here's your prescription. And when Harry Anslinger started Prohibition, the doctors didn't want to stop prescribing. They said, well, if I stop prescribing these addicts heroin, they're going to turn to the streets and their lives are going to fall apart. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So I'll tell you what, well, I'm going to we'll wrap this up. But before I go, I just want to say, is there anything you wanted to add to the conversation, something we didn't touch on or talk about your book a little or anything?
No, well, just, I guess, let people know where to find me. Is it okay?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, well, the book Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God is on Amazon. I have a website, KimberlyCares.info. And so you can, I do motivational speaking as well. So you can book me for that. You can contact me in any way if you need help or advice or resources, whatever the case may be. So definitely hit me up, KimberlyCares.info. I'm on all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I am on Twitter.
What's your Twitter handle so I can post about it?
I think it's Kimberly Cares.
Kimberly Care. All right. And then is that same on your Instagram?
Yep. Same on Instagram. And Facebook is Kimberly N as in November Clark.
Kimberly in?
In, as in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll put the post out there. Like I said, it'll come out not this. See what is today? A week from this coming Wednesday.
Okay.
Well, it's been great talking with you.
Thank you, bro. It's been good talking to you too, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing this, for having me.
Thank you for reaching out. It's been great. Yeah, definitely. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, good talking to you, and peace out.
All right. Thank you. See you later.
All right, later.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, peace, Nicks. As always, if you like what we're doing here on the Peace on Drugs podcast, subscribe to our newsletter at www.thepeaceondrugs.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, The Peace on Drugs. And if you really like what we're doing and want to help out, also go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. And once again, thank you so much for listening and being a part of this. Let's keep fighting the good fight, legalizing pot. Speaking of legalizing pot, it was funny. Everywhere I travel, there's always different rules. And New York City was a funny one. In Brooklyn, I went to this little place, and he was like, all right, here's the deal. You got to buy a piece of artwork, and then you get a free eighth of weed. And I was like, well, how much is the artwork? He goes, the weed that you pick will the price of the gift will reflect whatever weed you pick. So obviously it was just a weird way to sell you weed. I don't know if that's every dispensary, but it was just funny. And when I picked the piece of artwork, it wasn't like it printed it out. He just airdropped you a shitty photo on your phone, and then you bought the weed. Anyway, funny stuff. But thanks for doing this. Thanks for being a part of this. And peace out.